Here's something the $400 a roll insulation industry will never put in their brochure. The most powerful form of heat loss in your home has absolutely nothing to do with conduction, and adding more fiberglass in your walls won't stop a single watt of it. You can stuff every cavity in your house with bad insulation, seal every crack with foam, follow every single recommendation from every contractor who's ever handed you a quote, and you'll still be bleeding heat out of your living space through a mechanism that your entire home improvement industry treats like it doesn't exist. Radiant heat transfer. It's the invisible force that's been sabotaging your warmth since the day you moved in. And a $9 roll of aluminum foil from the grocery store is more effective against it than $3,000 of spray foam. That's not a sales pitch. That's thermodynamics. For decades, the insulation market has been selling you one number, R value. And that number measures exactly one thing: resistance to conductive heat flow. Conduction is how heat moves through solid material. Touch a cold metal pipe and your hand gets cold. That's conduction. Pack fiberglass between your wall studs and you slow that process down. R value goes up, contractors get paid, everybody goes home satisfied. Except you're still cold. Because here's what the industry conveniently omits from that conversation. In a typical enclosed room, radiant heat transfer accounts for anywhere from 40 to 70% of total heat exchange. Not conduction, radiation, invisible infrared energy streaming off every warm surface in your home, traveling through the air at the speed of light and getting absorbed by every cold wall, window, and ceiling it encounters. No amount of fiberglass stops that. Not a single R value rating in existence addresses it. But aluminum foil, cheap, thin, weirdly beautiful numb foil, does. To understand why a $9 roll of kitchen foil can outperform $1,000 of spray foam, you need to understand the three ways heat actually moves through space. First, conduction. Heat flowing through direct contact between materials. This is what R value fights. Second, convection. Heat carried by moving air and fluid. Draft sealing and weather stripping fight this. Third, and most critically, radiation. Electromagnetic energy in the infrared spectrum, emitted by any object above absolute zero, traveling in straight lines at the speed of light until it hits another surface and gets absorbed or reflected. Your walls emit radiation. Your body emits radiation. Your furniture emits radiation. Everything in that room is constantly broadcasting infrared energy in all directions. And here's the physics that changes everything. The amount of radiant energy an object emits is governed by its emissivity. That's a number between 0 and 1 that describes how efficiently a surface radiates energy compared to a perfect emitter. A value of 1 means the surface broadcasts every photon it possibly can. A value close to 0 means it holds its energy in, reflecting rather than emitting. Standard drywall, the white interior surface of virtually every room in North America, has an emissivity of about 0.9 D. It absorbs and re-radiates 90% of the radiant energy hitting it. Your walls are essentially thermal sponges, soaking up heat and broadcasting it back at whatever temperature they happen to be. In a cold climate, that wall is cold. It's radiating cold, absorbing your warmth and giving you back very little. That's why you feel cold, even in a draft-free room. You're not just losing heat through the wall material, you're losing it to the radiative exchange between your body and those cold surfaces. Now look at polished aluminum. Its emissivity is approximately 0.033%. That's not a typo. Polished aluminum reflects 95 to 97% of the radiant energy hitting it. It doesn't absorb your heat and hold it hostage. It bounces it back, every single time. Stefan Boltzmann's law governs the magnitude here. The total radiant energy emitted by a surface scales with the fourth power of its absolute temperature. That's not linear. It's dramatic. A surface that's just 30 degrees warmer than another doesn't radiate 30% more energy. It radiates dramatically more. Because you're raising temperature to the fourth power, that means a cold wall's appetite for your radiant heat is relentless, and the difference between bouncing that energy back with aluminum versus letting drywall absorb it is the difference between comfort and slow, invisible heat, death. Walk into any hardware store and ask about insulating a cold room, and they will hand you a brochure full of R values, guaranteed installation costs, and very little actual physics. Commercial radiant barrier products exist. Brand names, professional installation packages, products marketed specifically for what we're discussing. They'll run you $150 to $400 per roll, sometimes more, with installation adding several $100s on top. The underlying physics of these products: emissivity of around 0.03 to 0.05, air gap requirements of 3/4 of an inch minimum, shiny surface oriented toward the heat source. That's the entire mechanism. That's what you're paying $400 for. Now compare that to standard heavy-duty aluminum foil at your local supermarket. Cost approximately $9 per roll, emissivity 0.03 to 0.05. Same number, not close to the same number. The same number. The commercial products have better mounting hardware. They're slightly more durable. They come in wider rolls, but the fundamental thermal physics are identical. You're paying a 4,000% markup for slightly easier installation and a brand name. NASA has known this for over 60 years. Every spacecraft that operates in the thermal nightmare of space, where you can be 250 degrees Fahrenheit on the sun-facing side and negative 250 degrees on the shadow side simultaneously, uses multi-layer radiant insulation, thin sheets of reflective material with air gaps between them. The same principle applied in extreme form. Your room doesn't have to survive low Earth orbit, but the physics that keeps a Mars rover alive are the same physics that will keep your living space 20 to 30 degrees warmer this winter for the price of a pizza. Here is exactly how to build a functional radiant barrier system using nothing but aluminum foil, some basic fasteners, and about 45 minutes of your time. First, identify your primary heat loss surfaces. In most rooms, this means exterior walls and windows, the surfaces that are coldest and therefore creating the largest temperature differential for radiant exchange. In a basement or ground floor room, the floor is often a major culprit as well. Start with whatever surface feels coldest to your hand. That's your priority target. For walls, you're going to create a standoff installation. Cut your foil into panels slightly smaller than the wall section you're covering. You need the foil to be mounted away from the wall surface. Minimum 3/4 of an inch air gap, ideally 1 to 2 inches. This is the critical step that most people miss. Foil pressed flat against a wall without an air gap functions primarily as a vapor barrier and has severely reduced radiant barrier effectiveness. The air gap is the mechanism. Without it, you're just adding a layer. With it, you're creating a thermal system. Use furring strips, cardboard spacers, or even folded pieces of the foil itself to create standoff mounting. Attach the foil to the standoffs with staples, tape, or small fasteners, shiny side facing into the room. The reflective surface needs to face the direction the radiant heat is coming from, which in a cold room is the room itself, meaning your body heat bouncing back at you rather than getting absorbed by the cold wall. For windows, the physics are slightly different because glass has an emissivity of about 0.84 and transmits a portion of radiant energy directly. Here you want a slightly different approach, a reflective panel mounted a few inches inside the window frame, shiny side facing inward. This creates both a radiant barrier and a dead air space that adds minimal conductive resistance. Cut foil to match the window dimensions, attach it to a rigid backing, cardboard, foam board, thin plywood, and lean or mount it in the window frame with a 1/2 to inch gap from the glass. At night, this single intervention can reduce window heat loss by 40 to 60%. That's not an estimate. That's radiation physics applied correctly. For floors, particularly over unheated spaces like garages or crawl spaces, lay foil panels shiny side down, facing the cold air beneath, with at least an inch of air gap maintained by foam board or wooden strips. The ground beneath your feet has an effective emissivity close to 1.0. It wants your heat. A radiant barrier facing it says no. This isn't theoretical. The United States Department of Energy has published data confirming that radiant barriers reduce attic heat transfer by 25 to 40% in tested residential applications. Independent studies in cold climates measuring radiant barrier performance in wall assemblies show temperature maintenance improvements of 20 to 35 degrees Fahrenheit in enclosed spaces. The military has used reflective emergency blankets, Mylar, essentially the same mechanism, to maintain core body temperature in field conditions for over 5 decades. Emergency rooms use them for trauma patients. Mountain rescue teams carry them as primary thermal intervention tools. These aren't marketing claims. They're documented thermal performance metrics built on 2 centuries of radiation physics. One body radiating in that foil-lined room pumps out approximately 100 watts of continuous infrared energy. Without the radiant barrier, that energy hits your drywall, gets partially absorbed, and the wall temperature barely changes because the thermal mass of the structure wicks it away. With the radiant barrier, that 100 watts reflects back into the space. It accumulates. The air temperature climbs. Not because you added a heat source, you didn't, but because you stopped hemorrhaging radiant energy into a thermal system that was never going to give it back. What you now understand is something the average homeowner, spending thousands of dollars on their heating bill every single year, will never bother to learn. The insulation industry wants you focused on R-value because R-value sells fiberglass and spray foam and blown cellulose and contractor labor hours. Radiant barriers sell a roll of foil. The physics don't care about market share. The electromagnetic spectrum doesn't care about your contractor's margin. Heat moves the way heat moves, governed by laws that were written into the universe long before anyone decided to charge you $400 for a roll of reflective material. You now know those laws. You can work with them instead of against them. For $9.40, 5 minutes. That knowledge doesn't expire. It doesn't need to be reinstalled. It goes with you into every cold space you'll ever occupy, and it is fundamentally more valuable than any product catalog ever printed. Next time we're going into the other invisible killer, the one that targets you not through cold, but through moisture, and the physics of why your expensive weatherproofing might actually be making it worse.